Hello and welcome to Open School of Business. Today I am very happy to introduce you to Ina Gjikondi, who I met at the George Washington University. But what is very unique about her is that she's an entrepreneur. She built something new, ground up at the George Washington University that wasn't there before she joined. So as community of small business owners and community of entrepreneurs and startups, I think we can learn a lot from Ina's experience today. And she can tell us all about how she started and how she got interested in coaching to begin with.
Great. Thank you so much, Anar, for this invitation. And, entrepreneurship is... I would think of it as it's deep in my blood. My parents were entrepreneurs. They were small business owners. I'm originally from Albania, and I grew up with parents who caught sort of at that wave of transition when the country was coming out of communism. They were out there and they started their first business, which was a furniture business. And they knew nothing about entrepreneurship at that time. But a country coming out of communism, there was not such a thing as having your own business. So just the idea of freedom, that you can be open to opportunities and create a different reality for yourself. And witnessing at such a young age, that always felt empowering, because there was this idea that if you can picture it and you can hold the intention, you can move into action. And so growing up like that definitely provided a good grounding, I would say. And I feel even through the years of my education and schooling in Albania, in my home country, I always had that inner, I call it the inner Grinch, but it's like something when something doesn't feel right because there is the mold of the system that things need to be done a certain way. I always felt like, oh, we can try differently. Why can't we try it this way? Or why don't we push it this direction? And when I was 16, I started a nonprofit in Albania that supported the work of the United Nations. Was called the UN Association of Albania, and at that time I was also working and doing other things like campaign work. And as I move into my 18th year, I started working with other organizations as well, and did a lot of work. I was going to school as a lawyer to be trained as a lawyer, but my passion was building new things and creating spaces. And I've noticed that what I have been really good at is gathering that startup. I know many startups have that sort of initial energy, putting the flame, but then you have to sustain it. And while I've noticed of myself through the years is that I'm pretty good at that breaking the mold moment, I also need others and people to support and to continue to do the nurturing and the maintenance of the vision. That's just a general thought. But to come back to your question, or rather to just speaking a little bit about entrepreneurship and building things from the ground up. I landed at GW 15 years ago, and at this time I was going to school on a master's in political management. It was kind of throwing myself into something completely new, because this was a space that was so focused around US politics, and I had to learn new things pretty quickly, pretty fast, sometimes with sixth graders' civics books, but it helped me to understand the landscape and some of the foundations of how this country works and how things get done in the Washington, D.C. area. And as I was going to school, I also was finding it there was struggle because I moved from another country, and I know as humans, not just as entrepreneurs do, go through transitions. I feel we all need help in the journey, and we need to learn to ask for help in the journey. And through this transition, the school, I found out that the school was offering coaching sessions for students, whoever wanted it. And I was curious. I said, I have no idea, but it's getting my attention. And this one professor, Kathleen Schaefer, it's her name, she was teaching also a class in political leadership. And her class was very different from anything I had seen because she was focusing a lot on the inner capabilities, the inner capacities of the leader, getting that deep dive into getting to know ourselves, which I think it's foundational in any really, not just business venture, any venture in being able to be present and a contributor in the society. And so I started doing some sessions with her, and I found this time to be quite useful. And I kept thinking, wow, I wished I knew that this thing existed earlier on in my life too. I mean, even when I was a kid, I had all these questions, and yes, I had great supportive parents, and my mom had also helped. She had brought me at home for me and my sister this English language tutor, and he would do things in such a very different, he would facilitate learning in such a different way, which was getting this sort of deep dive into our inner work. So anyway, coming back to the coaching with Kathleen, I got more and more interested. And in parallel, I started working for the Center for Excellence in Public Leadership, where I continue to work today, and my role has changed and transformed over the years. But the center was doing a lot of work in what we call executive education. So supporting leaders and mid-career professionals, senior leaders, to continue with their development and their growth as leaders. And so that in this process, I started noticing the need for these leaders to have kind of this individual time. And part of it was they would be doing these 360 assessments, which, if for people who might not know what they are, they just get like a perspective on your leadership, and you get feedback from people from different levels across the organization that are related to you. And often we would have them do these professional development plans, and they had to write them down, and I had to provide feedback. And I found it challenging at times because offering feedback to something that I'm not engaging with or interacting, I'm like, I need to meet this human being and have conversations. And that's where it started. I started doing debriefs, one-on-one debriefs of 360s. And I figured that at that point I needed to get better at it, because I was just doing it by showing up as a human. But the coaching space needs also other considerations, and you need guidance. You can't just step into it. And at the same time, I was doing, after engaging with the center and the work of the center, I also started doing a master's in human resource development, which offered at the School of Education, which offered another set of grounding and foundation. So this was the starting point, just to give a picture of how I came to it. It was a moment of transition. And the other thing is, I was never used to asking for help. So that it was an interesting way for me to start asking for help. And to know that there is a profession out there that can actually help people to be heard. I don't remember who said this recently, but this idea of feeling loved is almost equal to the idea of feeling heard or being heard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is not just in the coaching space, and I think also not just for entrepreneurs, but for anyone. I think if we can find our inner voice and find the group of people or spaces or beings that can support us to get more in touch with that voice, I think it's a winner to be a jumping board into whatever venture we want to move into.
I love every bit of what you said, and I can see how certain ideas that you presented, I want to develop them. And I'm going to come back to some of those that were very interesting. But I do want to go back to that notion about, how little small revolutions create an evolution for learning and for entrepreneurship and development. So I want to go back to how you evolved at the Center for Leadership at the GW and created this completely new program. And it is widely successful with a lot of alumni coming out with certificates and coaching other leaders. Like you said, it was a very long journey, but it was an evolving journey. It wasn't just like you came in there and you just set up something and created and decided. So share some of those lessons that you picked up along the way of how you did it with the help of others, with your own ideas, and whatever that worked for you in that space.
Yeah, sure. Well, I did mention earlier a little bit of how I came to coaching, that connection. And I went myself through a coach training school. I went through New Ventures West, which is a really good school, and takes a very holistic approach to coaching. They call it integral. And through that journey, I did a deep dive on my own self. And meanwhile, at the center, the more we kept bringing in coaching and peer coaching, and we embedded a lot of these services in our leader development programs, people were becoming more and more hungry. They were asking for more. And I remember in the early days, we could barely sneak in 1 hour, 2 hours of coaching the most for leaders. And these days, if we don't have a coaching component, it's not called a leader development program anymore. So we lead with that in some ways, because it really supports and builds that inner capacity in people. And so we also started to hear from alums that were going through our program. They wanted to know more, to get to deepen their own skills. And they also asked whether we were offering anything further into this. So that was part of it, sort of the external need. But then the internal, my own journey to it, I think was important, because during this time, I had this vision and I wanted to continue to build the capacity. And we first said, let's focus our work to support people who are already on the path, who are already coaches, and let's take them deeper. We did that for a while, and we partnered because there were people who had already done the work, and we could move with it faster. So partnership is a great way to go. And that was a good try, which also told us that this is a very niche market. So it's good, but we wanted to reach more people, and we wanted to reach the mainstream, the people who don't always think of coaching or coaching as a career. So we did build this foundational coach training program, and I knew there were some things that we wanted to do differently. One thing was we wanted to bring the holistic, the multiple, and honoring the multiple intelligences in our system. So that was one. We call it eco leadership, and eco means several things. Means eco comes from the Greek word oikos, which means home, so a way of coming home and connecting. Eco also means an ecosystem. So how do we become aware of our own ecosystem, and then all the ecosystems of awareness that we're engaged in as leaders and as human beings. And then there is another element to it, which is the word E and the word co, which we use it as a way to talk about expanding inward to connect outward. And all of this, I say, came out of a branding process. And just to take a step back, I had written everything on paper because I think, how did this come? It came to me, and I had written it all down. And I remember going and talking to my boss, the director of our center, Jim Robinson. And I said, and Jim is a fantastic human being, but just a wonderful leader as well. And, you know, when if people talk about blessings, I feel like he's one of them for me, because he's always been a great support. And so I talked to him about the vision, and he's like, well, just go for it and move it. So to have people, the supporters early on in your journey who, and again, this is more of an intrapreneurship, because again, we're talking about the university and a space where you're creating things from within. Similar, and I would say the center itself is like that entrepreneurial spirit within the university. And the best example I can share, it comes from a book called Relational Ontologies, and the example of the rhizomes and the trees. And the rhizome is this little plant that can grow and grows fast, and the tree is more sturdy, it takes longer to be built. The rhizome can be adaptable, but it needs the tree to have that strength. And the tree needs the rhizome to become more versatile and flexible. So we need both of those energies. And I think the university feels like the tree, and the center feels, or the program, more like that infant that is trying to move to new avenues, but it needs the grounding. And so that was the initial stage. And I think the gestation stage took a while. Like, just keep writing, keep noticing, reading. Oh, I see the International Coaching Federation is focused so much on the process skills. I would like a program to focus also on developing the capacity of the coach, or the body of the coach, because that's essential. Without that, you can do process all day. So really we did different ideation sessions with our group of coaches and consultants, just to share with them. We use design thinking principles and things of that kind. We had several of those just to come to sort of the core. And then once we knew a little bit what that design or structure would look like, we hired a branding team, and that was another process on its own, because through the branding, I didn't know that I knew many things. I started discovering, in fact, the name was Conscious Leadership, and we ended up with ECO. And this is where I want to put another plug. I think it's important in the journey of birthing, if you will. I'm thinking of entrepreneurs as that journey of birthing. I had started to work with I didn't bring the personal healing journey. Through this process, I went through a significant illness and process of healing. I had to stop on the tracks and get better, and it took a while because it was this mysterious things that we couldn't figure out. I mean, I think I know today it was a form of burnout, and it threw off my system in so many ways. So I know for me, as a birther, I have to really, the lesson is I have to really know when I'm off balance, off track, so I can come back to myself and nourish. But as these things were happening, the healing journey was happening, I worked with a lot of healers and different alternative practitioners, and one of them that I had discovered is a practitioner that works with plant spirit medicine, out of the work of a guy, Elliot Cohen. And he, in working with this practitioner, I started hearing and listening to dreams in a new way. And one of the dreams that I had was a dream with Dalai Lama. And I remember getting up in the middle of the night and writing things down. And when I got up in the morning, I found the word eco written on paper, and they were written E separated with a line and the co, the way the program shows up today. I couldn't make sense what it was. I didn't know. And I started watching different things from Dalai Lama, movies, and reading documentaries. And in one of them, he talks about, and I kept always saying, oh, okay, it's expanding and contracting. It's about learning how to be in the space in between. And I learned that he talks about a practice called the practice of the exchange. He says we expand and we contract, which was the language I was using. And he says it's about taking in everything that doesn't feel right and releasing it back. It's known as, in Buddhism, the practice of Tonglen, which is cultivating inner peace and breathing out compassion. That's what it is. So I say this as an example, because having faith and trust in this, I had no idea why the word was showing up, but I had to trust it. And so there are certain things in the process when you're bringing to life something new that you have to cultivate and listen, which is your intuition. And your dreams are a direct connection to your subconscious minds, which is suppressed during the day because we're so active with our conscious mind that we don't hear that part of us that is dormant. So that's why dreams can actually help. And the dream work has become, now through Dr. Bonnie Buckner, my colleague, had become a significant part of our coaching program. We really capitalize on that. And so to add a few more things to it, iterations, piloting. Our first program was a pilot. I had a group of almost 15 faculty. We tried things together. I remember one of the faculties, he would say, we're building the plane as we're flying, and that's how it felt. Mm-hmm. And this first iteration was very revealing in many ways. And then I kept finding my own ego at times, like, no, this is not supposed to be this way. No, it has to be this way. And then resting into it and having people to lean on during that process is really important, because somehow you know what you want in the result, but the path is not always the path that you choose. And you have to allow space to process it, and you have to allow people to help you. And now we're in our fourth iteration. We have a good rhythm. This is where I feel like, okay, we're in a good rhythm. So it's a 6-year cycle. It's been a 6-year cycle to bring it to a place where it feels like, okay, we have a rhythm. And there's much more to it, but I have to pause because
I love it. I love every bit of it. And if you listen to some of our previous episodes, we actually had a researcher, a professor from Vanderbilt University who met Dalai Lama, and he was talking about his experience of working with him and how he is very lively and likes to use humor when he works with people. So I'm just more, I should say, inspired that, my podcast somehow brings in people that are very much connected, not through just the topic of the business and entrepreneurship, but also spiritually and seeing the bigger picture. So I also noticed how you've been evolving and constantly seeking more knowledge and getting more degrees. So I was wondering, how do you go through that? And when do you say sort of like, basically, when do you have that spark to go and get a new degree? Because obviously you have a lot of learning done in your past. Yes.
Well, yes, that's a really good noticing. I think so. The first degree I did was because I was so involved in political campaigning in Albania, and I really wanted to learn how to do campaigning differently in my home country. And so that's what moved me to come to GW and get a degree in that. But as I was doing that, I was like, no, this doesn't really feel like my space. And because I was doing learning and development, the degree that I entered into was in human resource development, closer to the kinds of things that I had an interest. So I could say was propelled by interest. At the same time, I will say I was an international student, so was also utilitarian at some extent, because that was giving me an opportunity to keep learning, but also stay longer and continue this U.S. experience. So continuing schooling gave me that opportunity to be in the country a little longer. So I will say both and for like there, right there. I'm always, now I'm doing my doctorate at the School of Education, and I don't go to chase my degrees because I have to do a degree. It hasn't felt like that for me. This degree now was sort of timing of things. I have been working and building this program, the coaching program, and I am very keen in integrating all these different ways of knowing to have good academic and research grounding in the work that we're doing, together with the human, build that with the human experience. And so the degree I stepped into was as a way to continue to go deeper with the research and the work that I've been doing, which is mostly in the space of pedagogy or eco-pedagogy, which is a kind of learning space where you are honoring agency of all beings, both human and non-human. And what I mean by that in plain language is honoring our connection, deep connection with the natural world, which is us. It's part of our evolution. It's never been outside of us. But then how do we bring more of that into the learning space so that we can keep witnessing our connection rather than our separation? And so, and then if you go a little further into coaching, how is this witnessed? Through a way of knowing that it's called direct, which is this experience in the moment, the way I'm noticing. And it's when all of our systems intelligence has come to a synchronous point, and we know that's truth for us in this moment, in this witnessing. Sometimes we call it, I had a gut reaction, an instinct, or an intuition, but it's more than just intuition. I think it's imagination, it's perception, is creativity, it's inspiration. There's different elements to it, and I've been wanting to learn about it. How do I know when I know? I want to know for myself. That's been my question. So to answer your question, it's always been my questions that have taken me into a step of stepping into a degree. I will also say that, and I don't want to, I appreciate education and the system that we're in, and at the same time I feel there's a lot of things we can improve of the system. And so I've always seen myself as the person who wants to do the bridging, to deeply understand how things work in a system, and then work with it to meet to meet people and understandings that where they are, so that you can offer also alternative and innovations and creative ways of doing things differently. You can't just go outside in, you have to go inside out. And so, this is not the path that everybody takes. Some people go out and they build ventures and industries, and they become greater influencers in many ways, because they can generate new ways of being, policies. And I mean, this iPhone that we hold in hand, most of us do, has shifted and transformed the way we do things. And so there's different ways to influence. And I feel that for me, my path is legitimizing and normalizing these multiple ways of being, and knowing that perhaps we don't pay much attention to, but they're innate and are in us. So I would really invite people to, and sometimes society values credentialing. Oh, she's got this credential, that credential. I am, and I will say, I've also had my struggles with my doctorate. The people who've been with me in my journey know. At times I wanted to quit it because the frame is too tight at times, and I don't feel my own voice and creative. Like, for example, when you write a dissertation, you can only offer your thoughts right at chapter 5 or 4 now. But the place where you talk about the findings and then some recommendations. The first 3 chapters, you only have to synthesize and talk about what everybody else is saying. So right there, you have this, you're being the synthesizer, because through your worldview, you're actually providing the, you're generating new knowing, new knowledge. It's through you that but we still call that empirical or factual, because this person said it, that person said it, and yet our own voice is denied, and it's missing. It's not missing. It's actually not being recognized. It's silent. And to me, and there are a lot of new waves also in that space of research. I know Dr. Julia Storberg-Walker at GW, who's also my chair, she's been doing a lot of work in this direction in terms of creating new waves for research, and really looking at how you embed the researcher in the research in a way that it's more integrated. So or other forms of expressing, like I know there's dissertations now where people do podcasts as a way of doing research. And I think all these forms of knowledge need to be honored. Who said a dissertation has to be written in 5 chapters? So
Yes. Yeah. I love that because I think it makes the academical work more relatable to entrepreneurs, where entrepreneurs also have an idea and they just want to build it. But really, you have to talk to your customers, build the user base, ask for constant feedback. So a lot of times, whatever we're trying to build is not necessarily what we had in mind in the beginning, because it's really serving the community and always being listening to the participants, to the users, and that what makes a successful product at the end. So perhaps same with the dissertation is in a bit of a, but also there's always a component, like you said, you can do a podcast, you can do a real organization, I don't know, a school or a study group that will follow the research, and even somehow you're not allowed to write about it in your first 3 chapters. You still know it works in real life. People are using it, and that can bring a lot of satisfaction.
yeah,
Hopefully.
absolutely. I mean, I think the readership, I think, would improve. And I again, there's a community of scholars that your work contributes to, and I think that's honorable and very important. And exactly, I think if we want to reach more people, we have to look at other ways of outreach. Almost like, I mean, you have to listen to that voice of the customer. Who is the audience is a key question anyway, but you have to meet people where they are. And so, especially if you want to do the bridge building and bring people along. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, Ina, thank you so much for your time. It's been a fascinating conversation. As a last encouragement words for our entrepreneurs or anybody who is starting something new within their organization or outside, what would you tell them?
Sharpen your intuition. Really start working intentionally to develop your inner voice, to listen to your inner voice in the process. Know when it's an ego voice and know when it's an authentic voice, because that's an important one to discern, whether when you're projecting and when you're in your own knowing. So that's what I mean by practice, because you can get this feeling that that's what it is, and you get lost in it. I think the inner voice is quieter, but the more you start to listen to it, it's going to get more excited and you're going to start becoming familiar. It's a muscle. So train your muscle of intuition and inner knowing.